Hello there everyone, it's really good to be with you again, and it's really hard to believe that we are racing towards the end of the year so quickly. When I got my latest issue of Daphne's Diary, which is number 6 of 2022, and you can see the cover here. I looked inside the magazine and I was absolutely delighted to see that there was this lovely double spread on making lavender soaps. And making soaps is something that has been really something that's been a big part of my life. When I was in South Africa and I had my shop, I used to teach soap making classes, and one of the soaps we learned to make was the cold process soap, or what we used to call the farmer's soap. And there are just very, very basic ingredients that are used for that. So I don't have a problem, as I said in my flip through, with this actual spread. You've got all the measurements here. It's not really very detailed in the method, and there are some safety tips which haven't been included in this. So I thought, well, let me share my knowledge with you so that you don't make any mistakes that could cause you any harm. And at the end of this, I will share with you my recipe, and I will just give you a breakdown of some of the really important points to remember. So one of the first things that you need to know is that you're going to be working with 3 basic ingredients. Now my soap recipe was a lot simpler than this, and so mine only had 3 ingredients. We used water, we used fat or lard, or in South Africa we called it wholesome, but it's just a white hard fat that you would use in cooking. I think probably in the olden days they used to use fat from lamb's tails. And then you use lye, which is also known as caustic soda or sodium hydroxide. Now the fat itself is very, very acidic, and the lye on the other hand is a really strong alkaline. So we need to have those 2 things in our minds while we're actually working with this recipe, because we're not baking a cake, or no, actually, excuse me, cakes are a little bit more scientific. You do need accurate measurements. You're not just putting supper together. Let's use that analogy, where you can just put a bit of this and put a bit of that when you're actually making the soap. When you rebatch the soap later, and I'll explain what that is, then you can do that. But initially, when you're making the soap, you need to be very specific, because the ingredients combine to form new molecules, and it is a chemical change that happens. So bear in mind that I said that the fat is very acidic. Oh, excuse me, I've got a tickle in my throat. And the caustic soda is very, very alkaline. So when you are measuring your things up, make sure that you actually always use plastic equipment or glass, because the caustic soda, which is, wait for it, what is a lot of drain cleaners. I thought that might get your attention. It did mine when I first read the recipe. The caustic soda will eat into metal surfaces. So you want to be making sure that you work with plastic bowls or glass bowls, and that you're actually pouring into plastic or glass or silicone molds, so that you don't have any problems there. If you work in something like an enamel pot, which you had an old one and I just thought, let me just test it. If you made soap in there, no matter what you do to try and neutralize the effects of the caustic soda, it just keeps slowly eating into the metal over time, and you will not be able to use that equipment for eating. So I always worked with glass bowls, which were Pyrex, so they could take heat, and then we used the measuring jugs, which were plastic, and we had plastic spatulas. My recipe was a little bit different. This one says 45 grams of caustic soda. My recipe was 28 grams of caustic soda, and I weighed it out because obviously I'm teaching and it's difficult to get people to work with chemicals that are dangerous all on their own. So I worked out that one of these old-fashioned film canisters took exactly 28 grams of the caustic soda. So pre my lessons, I would weigh out the caustic soda so that my students had minimal contact with it, and we minimized the risk of having any injuries. So that was my measure, but obviously if you're using a different measure, you're going to have to weigh things out. So what happens with this recipe, and I'm going to refer to mine now because mine has got the simpler ingredients. My recipe has 125 ml of water, 200 grams of lukewarm fat or lard, and 28 grams of lye, caustic soda, or sodium hydroxide. So you're wanting to dissolve the caustic soda and the water together. Here's tip number one. It's really important that you pour the caustic soda into the water and that you don't put it the other way around. And I'm not going to say it because you'll remember it, but you must put the caustic soda into the water, because if you do it the other way around, it tends to sort of go pop and sometimes go woof, and then it comes back up at you, and that can be dangerous. But if you put the caustic soda into the water, you don't have that kind of sort of like mini explosive kind of reaction. It doesn't always happen, but it does happen often enough to make it a concern. And then you need to melt your fat. So you could either do that in the microwave. Because I was working with classes, I just had some hot plates on the side of my studio, and we used to melt our fat there, and then we would start mixing. So we worked in glass Pyrex bowls, and we would pour the melted fat into the glass bowl, and then slowly pour in the solution which has got the water and the caustic soda or the lye in it, and mix it. Now you do need to stir for a while, and you need to look out for a trace. And the trace will tell you when your soap is combining, because you remember you're wanting the water and the caustic soda and the fat to combine together to form this new substance. And you will know what I'm talking about when I say trace, when I refer you back to your cooking and I say, when you've made a batter and you've actually got quite a thick mixture, and you can see your beater beating and it leaves that kind of swirl in the mixture. Think of egg whites. That's a good example. If you're making meringues or a topping, or you're beating egg whites, you get that swirl. That is what you're looking for, is that kind of swirl in the liquid. Now, if you are working with a hard fat, like the lard, then you're going to find that it's very easy to see that trace. When you're working with things like olive oil and coconut oil, it's going to be very visible, and sometimes you think, oh, it hasn't happened, and you might actually miss it altogether. So you need to read your recipe carefully, because they will normally give you an indication as to how long it takes to get to that trace stage. What you will notice when you're stirring up your liquid is that the mixture itself gets this kind of shiny watery liquid on the top of it. And magic, that is glycerine. So one of the byproducts of making your soap is that you get glycerine. And I learned from people who were in cosmetics and packaging and back home, that the cosmetic industry, when they're making soap, skim the glycerine off and then sell it back to you as an added ingredient into the soap. So when you're making your own soap at home, you actually have glycerine in that soap. So it's not really necessary to add extra glycerine. And what glycerine does is that it actually draws the moisture towards the skin, and that's why we have it in so many of our beauty products, to be able to help us be able to keep hydrated, especially in hot weather. Okay, so we've done the basic mixture. Let's just run over it because it is really important. You've got water, the very basics. Let me just put this card here again. You've got water, you've got your fat or your lard, and you've got your caustic soda. You're going to dissolve your caustic soda into the water, okay? And when you've done that, you're going to take your mixture and add it into that lukewarm fat. So caustic soda goes into the water. When you've dissolved that, you're going to get the lukewarm, mix it into the lukewarm fat. And one of the things that you'll notice that will happen when the caustic soda is dissolving in the water is that first of all your bowl gets hot. So you do need to be careful of that, and you'll see a lot of vapors rising up off there, so be careful that you're not inhaling those. Have a well-ventilated room, or even if possible try and do this outside, because it minimizes damage to your kitchen counters. Right, then the next thing that you're going to need to do is make sure that you have a container that you can pour it into. It's a good idea to grease that container even though you have fat in your solution, because the fat is now undergoing a chemical change. So we had in South Africa a product called Spray and Cook, which was like an aerosol cooking spray, and I used to spray our molds with that. But you could actually use just a spritz oil, or you could just take a little pastry brush and just grease the inside of the mold. It just helps to release it, and it doesn't make it greasy on the outside. then you would just gently pour your soaps in. Now this recipe says here, if you pour your soaps into the mold, it takes 6 to 8 weeks to set. That's not quite true, because your soap will actually set sooner if you're working with hard fats. So if you're working with lard and stuff, then you're going to find that that will set probably within a couple of hours. When you're working with liquid fats like your coconut oil and your olive oil, it's going to take slightly longer, but it won't take weeks and weeks and weeks. What we do need the weeks for is for this to actually cure, and that means it needs to neutralize the harmfulness of the caustic soda in the soap. And you'll find if you leave it for the full time that it's absolutely fine to use on your skin. So let's just refresh here, because I know this is a lot of information for you. You put your lye into the water and you're going to mix it. If you happen to get some of the solution on your skin, or even just the caustic soda or the lye on your skin, if you have lemon juice and you just rub that on your skin, it will take that burning away. You can wear safety gloves as well, and goggles. It would be a good thing to be mindful of. And then you're going to look out for that trace or for the swirl in the mixture. Then you know that the liquids and things have combined nicely. You're going to cure it for 4 weeks, so that you neutralize that harmful effect of the caustic soda. And then you're going to just look out for the glycerine that surfaces on the top. It will mix back into your soap, but it's something that's interesting to see, because that is the byproduct. What you can do at this stage, which I used to personally find easier, was that I would rebatch the soap at this stage, and that meant I would take my soap out of the mold. So I often used to just pour it into a loaf mold, or even just a lined cardboard box or a greased cardboard box, and then I would take the soap and grate it, and just with a very little bit of water I'd melt it down. And because at that stage we don't have that chemical process going on when we were first making the soap, it's far easier to get a purer color and to hold your fragrances. And if you wanted to add things like lavender or rose petals, tea leaves work really nicely. Sometimes you could find little bits of spices, all sorts of different things. Orange peel also really is nice in soap if you get the zest and you dry that out. I found that I had better effects putting all those sort of things in, colors, fragrance and texture, when I was rebatching than in the very beginning. I know some people just throw it all in the beginning, but it does tend to change the colors, and it also changes the fragrances. So that is my take on this lovely spread on how to make your soaps, and I'm going to just try and position this so that you can get all the important points together. I really do hope that this has been helpful. If you have any queries, and if I haven't explained this nicely in a way that you can understand, don't hesitate to get hold of me in the comments section, and I will get back to you quite quickly with an answer. But it is a really fun project to do, provided you take all the safety precautions. So thank you for joining me today, and please, if you have liked this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. I'd love to have you part of my community. Bye for now.